Hello, and welcome to Weekly Update. I'm Bill Galvano. This is the first of many shows that you will see where we will feature guests to talk about the big issues of the day that we face right here in this community, in the state of Florida, and throughout the nation. Today, we are very honored to have a distinguished guest with us, Congressman Vern Buchanan from the 13th Congressional District. Welcome, Congressman.
Bill, good to see you.
Good to see you. Congressman, why don't we start by talking about the changes that have taken place in Washington since the last election? I'm sure there's a lot, and there's a lot you can tell us on that.
Yeah, I think the big thing on November 2nd was the fact that we went from, in the House anywhere, my body, we went from we picked up 63 seats. So we were in the minority, going to the majority. The American people are upset about, as you know, Bill, a lot of issues, spending, jobs. They want to see people get back to work. So we're very excited about, where we're at and going forward. I was fortunate to get on a new committee. As you know, Ways and Means is probably the most powerful committee in Washington. Really focuses on commerce, taxes, trade. I'm on the subcommittee in trade, as well as Medicare and Social Security.
Well, we're all very pleased with your assignment. You've been a leader since you've been elected and have gone straight to work for us. And so this new committee assignment, that's post-election, that changed when Boehner became the Speaker of the House?
Yeah, it was effective right after the first of the year. We've been organizing. But, last week we had Tim Geithner. We had the Secretary of HHS or Medicare, Healthcare. So we've got a lot of witnesses in front of us. I just had a meeting today, in fact, with members in Manatee County, CEOs of Manatee County, because we're looking at the tax code. It hasn't been changed in a material way since, as you know, 1986. We want to make sure our companies are competitive, not just here locally, but in the country as well as abroad. So we're looking at in terms of the corporate tax rate. We have the highest tax rate right now in the country. So that's something that we're starting with right now, because the president has mentioned he's open to looking at the tax code, as well as our chairman of our committee, Chairman Camp out of Michigan, in terms of Ways and Means. So that'll be something we're looking at. The other thing I'm very excited about, being on the subcommittee for trade, Port Manatee, as you know, is the closest port to the Panama Canal.
Right.
We're going to do everything we can to help grow positive jobs there. We need diversity in this region. There's about 20,000 people employed there, directly and indirectly at the port. We'd like to see that grow to 50,000 good-paying jobs for working families. So that'll be something we'll be working on in a big way just in the next couple of months in terms of that.
Well, I know both of those issues have been a big priority for you, even from when you were running for office for the first time. And I understand those were positions, the committee positions that you were talking about were positions that you actively sought. Tell me about your relationship with Speaker of the House, John Boehner.
Well, we're very fortunate, and you had a chance to visit with him yourself yesterday. But, he's a guy that's very focused on creating jobs and cutting spending. I mean, if you look back in his 20-year career, now as a new speaker, he's never taken one earmark. That's just his own philosophy. But we're not, as Republicans, taking any earmarks today because of the spending. But he is very focused, as I am, in terms of the next 2 years, is what do we got to do to create jobs for working families, as well as to create those jobs. We've got to do everything we can to put the small business at the center, because they create most of the jobs, as you know, in the region. 99% of businesses registered in Tallahassee, I'm told anyway, are small, medium-sized businesses. They create 70% of the jobs. So we're going to do everything we can at the federal level to create the environment to make sure that they've got the best possible environment going forward in terms of less taxes, less frivolous lawsuits, also less regulation, because the regulation has really gone up quite a bit. So our focus is on jobs the next 2 years, and then of course we're very concerned. Last week we cut $100 billion in terms of expenses. We just got the numbers in a few days ago. Our deficit, we're over $1.6 trillion last year, year before $1 trillion, the year before that $1 trillion. So we're at $14 trillion in debt, going to $20 trillion. So that's probably the other 800-pound gorilla. One is job creation, good paying jobs. Two is figuring out a way to deal with the debt and deficit in our country.
Well, and at the state level, jobs are a priority as well. You know, we have a new governor, Governor Scott, and that's what he ran on, and that's what he intends to accomplish for the state of Florida. Jobs, 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 as he says it. Let me ask you first, you have a relationship with Governor Scott. Is that true?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I spent about 2 hours with him, a little over a month ago, and then after the swearing in, had an opportunity to visit with him, and then he called me the other day. But he is very focused. He wants Florida to be the best place to do business. We've got a good saying at our chamber and the region here that I chaired, which is good life, good business, meaning that we've got to have a good environment because good water quality, good, we got a lot of sunshine, but we've got to have an environment that's favorable to tourism and stuff. But the bottom line is he's been in business a long time. Unfortunately, a lot of people haven't, and he wants Florida to be the best place to do business. And I think as a result of that, we'll just have an environment that's more friendly for small businesses. And so I'm very excited about that, and I think he's very sincere. You know more about this than me, but I think one of the things as a new governor or someone new in the governing business, the big challenge is he's going to have to find to work with the legislature, which you've been a part and a leader of for many years, is to make sure there's a good working relationship. I see where everybody has somewhat the same philosophy to get people back to work. You guys have done a good job making the tough calls and spending, but the only thing I would sense is that what I'm hearing from some members, and you might know this better than me, is he's going to have to really reach out more because it is a partnership. I'm kind of like him. I was a CEO running companies, or as a business person running companies over the year. It's different when you're the controlling shareholder than when you go to Washington or you go to Tallahassee. It's more of a partnership. It's more of a give and take. But he's got a good team up there, as you know. And so I'm very optimistic for Florida long term. I think he's got the right vision. I think it's just important that he finds a way to work together. Not that he's not, but I think he needs to reach out probably a little bit more because I think a lot of members feel there's not enough communication. But that being said, I think we're very early in the process as well.
Well, and it's like you said, he doesn't come from a political background per se. He is now in politics, bringing with him his experience in the business world. And you're right, it is different. And our framers set it up that way so that there's give and take between the branches. Do you feel like the state legislature as a whole has been working well with our Florida congressional delegation and will work well with them in the future?
Yeah, I think, I'm very proud of what you've done, your leadership and others. I'll say candidly, compared to what's happened in Washington. You guys, have had to make cuts in the last 3 or 4 years, or let's say the last 5 years, made a lot of tough decisions. Many years you've had to cut a couple of $1 billion out. I think the budget's probably $6-8 billion less than it was.
Yes.
And you've made those tough choices. And there's usually always a certain amount of fat. You hate to cut into the bone, but you guys have, again, made those choices. Unfortunately, in Washington, we haven't. We've grown spending the last 2 years with administration, and I say part of the Congress as well, 24%. So we look today to cut 3% out of the overall budget. It seems like a big number, but in terms of the growth of the spending, it's a problem. So that's why I push a constitutional balanced budget, that you don't spend more than you take in. You got to make the tough choices. They don't in Washington. So I'm very proud that what you guys have done, made those tough choices, painful choices, because I know there's a lot of programs that are important to Manatee and others where they're not getting as much money maybe as they did 5 years ago. So but in terms of working together, I think there is a good working relationship. I've reached out, the president, had dinner with him the other day, Herodopoulos, and then I met with lunch the other day with Dean Cannon. So they're very focused, I think, on the same thing. We're all concerned about getting people back to work in Florida. We have 14 million people out of work in the country. I think a million or so in Florida, and as their neighbors and friends. And so the big focus needs to be on jobs, because even on our deficit, a big part of our deficit is because we're writing checks out. And it'd be nice to have these people back to work where they can write a check and help build some revenues in Washington. So that's why the focus needs to be on jobs.
Well, I've always appreciated that you have pushed a balanced budget amendment. A lot of people don't realize that we have to balance the budget in Tallahassee, and that's a good thing. It means we have to make tough decisions, and it means that we have to prioritize, but it is a good thing. Unlike some other states that actually run deficits and find themselves in a very difficult fiscal times, Florida has maintained its financial stability, and it would be wonderful if you and your colleagues are successful in eventually helping us get that way in Washington.
Well, my first week in Washington 4 years ago, when I became a new member in '07, I introduced that Buchanan Constitutional Balanced Budget Amendment. Now that I've been in the minority the last 4 years, now that I'm in the majority, I reintroduced that, and I'm hoping that we can move towards that, which just simply says, as families or working families or businesses or anybody else, you don't spend more than you take in, and that's really what it should be. So my balanced budget calls for, you can't change that tomorrow because we're too much in the hole, but over a period of 5 years, you do that. First year I was up here, Bill, we took in $2.7 trillion of taxpayers' money. Our revenues were up 10% for the year, so almost $300 billion, and we still overspent at $130 billion. And so, but fast forward that 3 or 4 years later, now we're overspending that $130 billion by 10 to 12 times more. And there's a lot of frivolous spending that's going on, and we need to find a way that they have to make the tough decisions, which means if you take in $3 trillion of taxpayers' money, you give the best value you can for the taxpayers, as you have, and you've led on that issue in Florida.
Let's talk about the Senate, the U.S. Senate. You have a majority now in the United States House. There have been changes in the United States Senate, but still not a Republican majority. It's a Democratic majority. How's the relationship there? Have you seen a change in working with the Senate?
Unfortunately, Washington, I'd say the last 20 years is more about winning than losing in terms of members. And I was glad we got the tax bill done at the end of the year on a bipartisan basis. But my attitude is that the Democrats or Republicans, we're all Americans. We need to be fighting for what's best for America and find a way to work together. We might not agree on everything, but, as someone said, or Ronald Reagan said, if you can get a half a loaf now and get the other half later, politics is about the art of the possible, someone said. And that's really what we need to do in Washington. We're not going to agree on everything, but we've got to find a way to work together. But as you know, and you mentioned early on, that's the way the Founding Fathers structured this. They were concerned about absolute power. They liked the idea of a divided government where we control the House. It's not that we can advance our agenda, but we can, at least they got to negotiate with us to get anything done, but we can stop their agenda and vice versa. They could stop whatever we put out. We had $100 billion in cuts last week. They could say no cuts or whatever, but we're representing what the American people are telling us that they want. They want us to cut the frivolous spending, and that's what we're trying to do. And some of it's not all frivolous. Some of it is just we're going to take 5 or 10% of a lot of different budgets. But we've got to find a way to work together, the Senate and the House, and I'm hopeful we can, because we've got a lot of big issues, and that's going to call for a bipartisan effort to get some of these things done.
Well, you have a new senator up there, a new senator from Florida, Senator Marco Rubio. And Senator Rubio, of course, served in the Florida House with me. In fact, he was my speaker for a while, and fascinating young man, and seems to really be hitting the ground running. Have you worked with him? Have you talked with him about some of your priorities or his priorities? And
yeah, I think we don't agree on everything, but we agree on most. I mean, I think at least my my thrust in terms of, as I brought up a couple of times, is helping small business and creating jobs and cutting spending. And he's right there on that. And I think a lot of Republicans and some Democrats. So I think he's got a lot of talent. I mean, you just don't win the Senate. You know, he beat the governor. I mean, he's obviously very talented, very charismatic, and he's a young person. And he's also talked about entitlements and other things, and a lot of subjects that a lot of politicians don't want to bring up because they're worried about keeping their job. But the bottom line, I think he's the right person in Florida at the right time. And there's a lot of people that are concerned about the spending, and he's willing to make the tough choices. But I was talking to some other folks the other day about the senator, and they mentioned that he's putting his head down, he's going to work.
Right.
I think he was just over in Afghanistan, and you'll see that. And you know this better probably than I do, but you have a lot more respect of your colleagues, especially in the U.S. Senate, if you come in there, do your homework, learn the issues, because it is different than the state issues, and find a way that you can work together with the other side as well, where there's an opportunity to work together.
Another difference between the federal government and the state, and you and I talked about this a little yesterday, is the fact that you have this whole body of issues on foreign policy. Can you comment a little bit about that and what your role is?
Well, I mean, obviously, we have pretty much, it's one of the things I like about Washington. If there's one thing I like, a lot I don't like, but one thing I do like is the diversity. You know, we have to find and make friends with people we can make friends with in the world. If you look at Israel, we've had a good working relationship. They're the only democracy in the Middle East. Of course, if you look at in terms of Egypt, what's going on there, we want to see that be stable. We want to see a democracy, a friendship there, because obviously the canal that runs through there, you know, and they're on the southern border of Israel as well, you know, we've got to move a lot of tankers and things through there in terms of oil. That shows up at the gas pump if that becomes destabilized. So we've got a big vested interest in the Middle East. But yeah, we try to find it also just in terms of trade, where there's opportunities to trade together. That a lot of times makes for friendships and ways that we can kind of work together. But you have every country, every free country anyway, represented in Washington. I'm working on some trade agreements with Korea, Panama, and Colombia. They all have offices there. We work with those folks because we want to find a way that it works for them, but it also works for us. Because the president even mentioned that we want to double our exports or really increase our exports, and I think it makes sense because we can create a lot more jobs by exporting, especially with Panama. Panama is a natural. We think we can. I think they're putting $4 or $5 billion in their expanded canal to get the mega ships, because they're having to go all the way down around South America to get up this way, and we want to take advantage of that in terms of Port Manatee.
Obamacare. We know what you all did in the U.S. House. What's the future? What do you foresee happening with that change in health care, and what would you recommend we do?
Well, the big thing about health care, and you've seen this in the business community, the chamber here has, used to have, I don't know, it still does, about 2,500 businesses. The chamber in Sarasota has about 2,500 businesses. Both have about the same size. But one thing they both have in common, most of them are, 50 employees or less. That's who we are. There are some bigger companies. But the number one issue when I was chairman of the chamber or working with small business was affordable health care. One thing this bill does not do, and I try to make it, I'm pretty candid when I speak about it. It doesn't do anything to bend the cost curve on health care. I'm sure with your firm or other businesses, for a family of four, it's $1,000, $1,200. If you get something fairly decent, Blue Cross or Blue Shield, they claim the next 10 years they could go up as high as $30,000. What the health care bill does do, though, and I think that's kind of what they're trying to do, they'd like to see this give 30 to 50 million, pick a number, either free or highly subsidized health care. And the reason I voted against it is because you're going to have to raise taxes. Our spending right now is out of control in terms of what we're spending. Right. We can't afford another entitlement program. And when you're $1.5 trillion over budget, you got the first baby boomer this year turning 65 and 78 million to follow. They've earned and are looking forward to their Social Security and Medicare. And then we participate with you on Medicaid in the state. So we can't afford right now another entitlement program. Now, that being said, we're spending enough in health care dollars today to cover everybody. We're spending twice as much as any other country in the industrialized world, the U.S. We've got to find a way to deliver quality health care, like Medicare, for example, be able to maintain the quality of what we're doing, but we've got to find a way to get that cost down substantially so that we can have more dollars available to help people that can't afford it. And we've got to find a way to get health care down, because I heard the other day, and I hear this all the time, where I didn't hear it, you've got people that are in their 50s, two people, maybe their children are grown, they're paying as much as $2,000 a month. Now, that's a house payment and a car payment combined. I grew up in a little my parents, $100 a month house pay. It's crazy what people are having to pay for health care. And I'm sure with your firm, when you get that bill in, every year it's going up 20%. One of the largest employers in this region, CEO, I met with him the other day, his health care bill went up, and this is in my congressional region, $1.5 million in 1 year. Now, they've got a lot of employees. That was what he's told me. But if you've got to pay that much more continuing in health care, you're not going to be able to add other jobs. So it's completely out of control. I met with one pharmacy that's privately owned, not an Eckerd, but a privately owned, had 22 employees. He told me his bill went up 22%. So I'd be interested in your firm, what your latest bill you got for the firm, or anybody else, but I know that most people are getting bills anywhere between 20 and 30% increases. Despite the bill being law now, they're still getting big increases, so it's not doing anything to bend the cost on health care. And that's why I'm saying I applaud the president for taking it on. It's just the wrong bill. It's just the wrong law. It doesn't do anything to cut the cost of health care. And for example, with trial lawyers, there's nothing in there. They claim we could save $55 billion. You got a 4,000-page bill and does little or nothing in terms of defensive medicine or med-mal liability. One of the doctors the other day, a neurosurgeon, said he's paying $200,000 a year for med-mal insurance. I mean, you got to see $1 million worth of patients to pay the $200,000. And so there's a lot that needs to be done with it. I just think it's the wrong bill at the wrong time. And I'm committed to our veterans and seniors. We've got a lot of commitments to them in terms of disability and income for veterans and veterans that are retired, seniors that are counting on Social Security and Medicare benefits. And we have another gigantic $1 billion plus program we're introducing right now. It's just the wrong time.
So what is the future of Obamacare? Do you think the Senate acts, or?
Well, we voted to repeal it, and we want to come up with something we can replace it. I don't know what they're going to do in the Senate. I think even if they got something done in the Senate, frankly, I think the president would veto it, so it'd kick it back, and you're not going to go anywhere. So I don't see it changing materially. We're going to look for ways to defund part of it, but the bottom line, that'll be a big decision probably in 12. I think for the voters, they'll get a chance to really look at it and see what it is. There are some good things, but most of it is not a good thing in terms of where we're at as a country. It doesn't do anything to bring down the cost of delivering health care. And frankly, health care is bankrupting this country. We can't continue to see health care costs go up like it's been going up for the last 10 or 15 years. And like I said, we're paying twice as much as everybody else in the world, and that's got to end, and it's got to end now.
Well, and I appreciate your leadership on this issue now for years. I recall when I was working on the kid care bill, which was to get people on the preventive medical side as opposed to the remedial side. You were very helpful with us in the Florida legislature in that regard. But like you say, it does, everything at the end of the day relates back to jobs, and jobs create prosperity, jobs create economic growth and a better quality of life.
And I want to say something, because your leadership on the kids' care was really important for the state. You led that effort, and I support it because, you know, the kids, when you look at kids need to have access to health care, because you're going to pay one way or the other. And, you know, and I grew up in a blue-collar family, but in terms of health care for the kids, it's a very small percent of what we spend overall in health care. Like it or not, I mean, the reality of it is the consumption of health care for a person's life, half of it's in the last 6 months. So it's the children, really. Their cost of providing health care is very minimal compared to what we're paying overall for health care in the country. So I appreciate, because you're talking about single mothers working 2 jobs with 3 kids and, you know, don't have health care. And I think it's important that we make sure that our children in this country have health care.
Well, I agree. And I think the other aspect to it is that ultimately health care is provided, but when it's provided without planning, without the availability of a health plan, and someone just shows up in the emergency room of the hospital, that's when it becomes extremely costly. And by getting children on a plan where they can have a $10 vaccination that saves $2,000 later, it's just the right idea.
If you look at what it costs, children make up 25% of the population. I heard at a Boys and Girls Club, and they make up 100% of the future. But that 25% is probably, I don't know that number, but it can't be 10% of the cost of health care overall in terms of dollars. So that's why that's a great investment, to find a way to help the kids where the parents can't provide it, or a parent, usually it's a single mother, can't provide it, where we can help those kids. So again, I appreciate your leadership on that issue.
Well, Congressman, unfortunately, we're running very low on time. It's been a fascinating discussion, and one that I wish could go on for hours. But before we leave, if there's anything else you would like to share with your constituents, I welcome you to do that.
Well, I think, as I've kind of expressed here, is our focus is going to be, for the next 2 years, the 2 biggest issues. I mean, there's immigration. I was with a group today who want to talk about immigration. That's critical, but illegal immigration. But the 2 biggest issues is helping people get back to work with good paying jobs and finding a way to move towards a balanced budget amendment. That's what I'm going to be working on, my major 2 thrusts in the next 2 years. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your new show, and look forward to being on in the future, and I look forward to you being our next senator here.
Thank you, Congressman Buchanan, and thank you for joining us on Weekly Update. Again, this is a new show which will be featuring many guests to talk about very pertinent issues facing our community, our state, and our nation. Thank you.